Bad trackpoint, by user Objeferet. I had a call complaining about their mouse not working as it was twitching all over the screen. Coming from a graphic designer, this was a bit more than annoying, it was work stopping, so I went to their desk to take a look. The mouse cursor was twitching in place without touching the mouse. I had them disconnect the corded mouse and it still happened. Being a laptop with built-in touchpad and trackpoint, we used the keyboard shortcuts to disable them with no effect. Even with no enabled mouse, the cursor continued to twitch. I was about to get them to turn it off and hand it over when I asked if they had any other mouse for the laptop, Bluetooth, or anything. It was a look I won't forget. I could see in their eyes their recognition of the problem, embarrassment, and then regret for asking for my assistance. Without saying a word, they reached into their laptop bag, pulled out their Bluetooth mouse and powered it off. The cursor remained perfectly still on screen after that. We all have days like that, not something to be embarrassed about. I've overlooked the obvious solutions in the past and I'm sure to do it again, probably later today even. This truly is a thankless job. Literally thankless, by user automatic_mulberry. I don't want to dox myself by getting too much into the technical weeds on this one, so this is probably too vague to be interesting. But over the weekend, we had a round of Windows patching. One of the patched servers runs some software that I support. After the patching, the application would half-start, but would not get to a usable state. The shift before me put some time into trying to fix the application software, but there was no joy. It kinda sorta looked like a Windows issue, and it was just coming back from patching, so they escalated to the group that supports Windows on the machine. The Windows people dug into it for a while, but they couldn't find any joy either. Eventually, after the shift change, they asked me to look into it again from the perspective of the application software I support. I am casting no shade at all on the previous shift of my team, nor on the Windows people. I went down a deep, convoluted rabbit hole of weird-ass error messages and clues. I pulled out a bunch of tricks I have not used in the last 10 years of supporting this software. Finally, I was able to get the software running just enough that I could locate a bad component and disable it. And then it all just worked. Long story short, the application team had coded this component, but they had not adequately tested it in lower lanes. They certainly had not tested it in a prod-alike environment, because it interacted poorly with the redundancy setup, causing the outage. It only happens on startup in that redundancy setup, so they just didn't see it. It was probably running in prod for weeks before the server got rebooted. So I wrote up all my findings and explained that I had disabled this, non-critical, but convenient, component of their app code in order to recover their system. The system had been completely unavailable for more than 4 hours by this point, but I was able to bring it up with zero data loss, although I thought at one point that I was going to have to rebuild the system on bare metal. Immediately, the application owner started bitching about how much they needed this feature. They were campaigning to get it re-enabled ASAP. I sent an email advising, in all caps, that they not do so, or they would cause another outage. One of their own people chimed in with a told you so. By the time I logged out for the day, they still had not re-enabled it, so I am hopeful they got the point, but I am not on shift again today, so who the hell knows what those idiots got up to. But here's what really frosts my cookies, there was literally zero thanks from the application team. The Windows guy said good job and filed it in his notes for future reference, but all I got from the app people was grief. Even though they wrote the verdammt code that took their app down for multiple hours, even though I saved their butts from data loss and a much longer outage for a rebuild, even though I recovered without even a single lost byte, they couldn't be bothered to say thank you. In my company, there's a big deal made about recognition. There are awards and announcements and trophies and all sorts of hoorah when people get thanks. But support people like me, who routinely work weekends and save people from their own errors, seem to be exempt from any of it. It's literally a thankless job. Even though I hate tooting my own horn, the last few years of this have really rubbed me the wrong way on this, so I pretty regularly bring it up to my boss and grand boss. I used this whole situation as fodder for another email extolling my hard work and the general lack of gratitude I see on a daily basis. My team literally has the job of keeping critical software running, and fixing it when it's broken, but we get very little for it. Not thanks, and certainly not money. I hope some of you, at least, get appropriate gratitude, because it sure as shit isn't happening in my office. Turn on the TV to select boot, by user Strasdis1. The setup is thus: a friend has bought a new GPU and is complaining the computer is taking forever to start with it. He has already tested the GPU in another computer and it works fine. Putting his old GPU also makes the system work fine. So I arrive at the scene, he turns on the computer and two monitors boot on. Monitors are displaying blank black screen and nothing happens. We wait as per his instruction and some minutes later Windows starts booting. We do some basic troubleshooting and everything seems to be in order. At this point during one of those long boots I start randomly clicking keyboard buttons in hopes for a reaction. Reaction comes when I press enter, the computer boots almost instantly. At this point I notice that the GPU output has 3 cables plugged in, while there are only 2 monitors. The third one traces its way to the TV. The friend confirms that he sometimes uses TV as a display. I tell him to turn on the TV and we restart the PC again. And here we see the issue. The guy has dual boot set up and the computer is asking which OS to boot into, but for some reason choosing the third display to do that. After 180 seconds it auto-selects the first boot, OS loads with a 3-minute delay. Once boot is selected OS correctly identifies the primary monitor and uses it to show loading, before that it decides to use the TV for some reason. The solution was to switch the ports on a GPU for the monitors. The false positive machine, by user want Debian thinks. To illustrate something, briefly close your eyes and think about how many emails your company gets per day. Is it a lot? I bet it's a lot. The other week the MSP I work for adopted this new email security tool that creates a ticket every time a user gets an email from a new domain. Bob Bobson signs into the bank account of Bobson's Bait and Tackle, but forgot his password. Freedom Bank and Trust sends a reset link, but his company hasn't gotten any emails from FBT since we adopted the new system, so those emails get routed to us first. We release the email, and FBT should be allowed through. Later, Joe Mononym at Mononym's Monochrome Signs logs into his account with FBT, gets an MFA link emailed to him, but it goes to us first because we haven't cleared FBT for them. Also, it, as far as I'm aware, didn't have any kind of learning period or way for us to tell it these emails are cool. Finally, it wants us to clear each individual Gmail address. I'm not sure if we're clearing FBT per email address too, or if they're per domain. Between this and the system that lets us know about non-interactive logins I'm expecting I'll hit 60 build hours this week while having under 10 hours of working time. Cameras ate my network, by user noldstuff_192. Solo IT jack of all trades for an SMB. 60 users across 6 sites and 300 kilometers. I hate that I have to repeat that every time I post, but without that info, none of what I deal with makes any sense to people with normal IT jobs. I have service providers and vendors at the edges of my purview. Sometimes, the party responsible for a particular problem can be a little difficult to parse out, especially when I can't reproduce a problem myself and have to rely on user complaints to understand what's happening. Also relevant background. All workstations connect to an online virtual desktop environment, which is where the actual work happens. The virtual environment is hosted by an MSP. So, within the virtual environment there's all the monitoring I could want, but there's no RMM on the actual, physical PCs. A site-to-site VPN covers the whole company. Now that we've covered that preamble, let's get to the complaint that kicked this whole mess off. The system is really slow. What's slow? The ERP? The terminal? Your internet? I don't know anything, get over here and fix it. Very helpful. I know. PAR for the course, the office manager over there is a technophobe of the highest order. Not the worst user here either. The call came in from the dispatching office of a logistics center about a 15-minute drive from my office. So, not the same approach as if it was an office down the hall. I did all the checks I could from my end, but I knew I had a couple of blind spots. For one thing, I can't remotely check the local LAN, or the quality of the internet connection, without physically being there or remoting into a PC, no RMM, remember. I've tried remoting into PCs before to troubleshoot network stuff and it's a huge pain in the ass because I have to install my suite of diagnostic software, and hold up a workstation while I do it. I prefer to just go and do it in person. I was able to remotely ascertain that the site-to-site VPN was working properly, and that there was a modicum of internet connectivity. After fielding a few calls that came in regarding unrelated stuff, I checked in with them and they said it got better. Great, I'll file this under maybe if I pretend it never happened it won't happen again. Of course, it recurred from time to time. Neither I nor the ISP nor MSP could pin it down, and I figured it might be crappy internet infrastructure that we were about to replace anyway regardless. The MSP was able to tell me they had seen a lot of outbound traffic from the site, and with their logs I found that the IP camera setup was a big factor, but nobody could figure out why it was spiking like that, randomly. At the time, there was a single 40/10 copper connection for that office. Cameras, internet connection for PCs, phones. I tried a few times to remote in via any desk during a slowdown, but the connection would be so bad I couldn't do anything. Attempts to get anyone in the office to cooperate over the phone did not succeed. The problem continued, but I had made a good faith effort to solve it, without success. I had to handle several irate calls from upper management about this. My answer at this point was, I think you have too many cameras on site, but I don't know why it's worse at some times than others. Fast forward a few months. New internet infrastructure across the whole company. A nice big 100/10 fiber connection at the logistics center and a THC 1000/100 connection at HQ, along with new network infrastructure. It was a hell of a project. I made a bunch of friends on our ISP's tech support team. Did the problem go away? No. It got worse, would last longer and was more frequent. But I finally caught it live for the first time. I got over there in time and connected to the network, and sure enough I could see there's quite a bit of lag on the internet. A speed test revealed that something was slamming the upload bandwidth. A few minutes of Wireshark later and I could see it's the NVR the cameras are connected to, absolutely pissing outbound traffic. A few minutes later the activity drops and suddenly the upload traffic is reasonable again. Why in the world would, wait a goddamn minute. I call the crew and ask, get any new camera monitors lately? Turns out around the time the slowdowns first started, upper management had gone over my head and had our AV system vendor add a big ass screen to a new office that pulled 16 camera feeds, mostly from the logistics center. When turned on, it pushed the outbound traffic from that site over the edge and choked the bandwidth, which didn't have a whole lot of headroom to begin with. In celebration of our new gigacadbit connection at HQ, they added more screens to 2 other offices. Actually, scratch that. It would never have occurred to them that our new connection meant they could do that, they just did it. Turning on any one of these new monitors would add about 5-8 Mbit each, depending on exactly which screen, of upload traffic to the poor, beleaguered connection at the logistics center. One was noticeable, 2 slowed things to a crawl. My Wireshark capture happened to catch somebody just as they were turning off their screen. Nobody thought to ask me about it before doing it, even when the people putting the screws on me to solve this were the ones with these big screens in their offices. Talk about shadow IT. Some closing comments. I'm guessing a pro network engineer would have caught on quicker. I am arguably professional on the best of days, but definitely not a network engineer. Who knew there's more to it than green blinky good, amber blinky concerning, red blinky bad, no blinky sad. Everything I know about networking I've learned on the job, and I don't know everything. Why no RMM? No good answer to that. These kinds of problems are infrequent enough that setting up Mesh Central hasn't been at the top of my priority list. I actually have a nifty little jump server set up now, made from Raspberry Pis, following this debacle, but that's a different post for a different sub. Edit, what happened next? Not terribly interesting. There was some grumbling about the internet connection not being about to handle the load being bullshit because shit is just supposed to work. Then I worked a bit with the AV guys and relayed the streams, with their bitrates tweaked, to the NVR on HQ's network, so that they could duplicate them to their heart's content without choking the logistics center's bandwidth. We made it work.